The first day of school is often filled with excitement and anticipation, and for Malik Johnson, it was no different. He woke up early, his heart racing with the thrill of new beginnings. His mother, Miss Johnson, had laid out his favorite outfit, a crisp blue shirt and khaki pants, while he meticulously polished his sneakers until they gleamed. As he looked in the mirror, he felt a surge of confidence. Today was the day he would make new friends and embark on a journey of learning. As they drove to Maplewood Elementary, Malik chattered animatedly about the things he hoped to do: meet his new teacher, explore the playground, and maybe even join the soccer team. Miss Johnson smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had worked hard to create a nurturing environment for Malik, instilling in him the values of kindness, respect, and resilience. She believed that school would be a place where he could thrive. However, as the days turned into weeks, the excitement of that first day began to fade. Malik returned home one afternoon with a cloud hanging over him. He had been unusually quiet during dinner, pushing his peas around his plate instead of eating. Miss Johnson noticed the change in her son's demeanor and felt a knot of concern tighten in her stomach. "Malik, honey, is everything okay at school?" she asked gently, her voice laced with motherly concern. He looked up, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Some kids are being mean to me, Mom," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "They say I don't belong there. They call me names." Miss Johnson's heart sank. She had heard whispers of Mr. Thompson's influence in the neighborhood, his prejudiced views seeping into the minds of children. It was disheartening to think that Malik, her bright and kind-hearted son, was now a target of such ignorance. "What do they say, sweetheart?" she pressed, trying to keep her voice steady. "They said I shouldn't be in their school because I'm black," Malik replied, his voice trembling. "They said I should go back to where I came from." The words struck Miss Johnson like a physical blow. She felt a mix of anger and sadness wash over her. How could children, so young and innocent, be taught such hate? She wrapped her arms around Malik, pulling him close. "I'm so sorry, baby. You are perfect just the way you are, and you belong anywhere you choose to be," she reassured him, her heart aching for the pain he was experiencing. That night, as Malik lay in bed, Miss Johnson sat beside him, her mind racing. She knew she had to take action. This was not just about her son. It was about creating a safe and inclusive environment for all children at Maplewood Elementary. She couldn't let Mr. Thompson's toxic influence continue to spread unchecked. The next morning, Miss Johnson made her way to the school, her heart pounding with determination. She approached the principal, Mrs. Carter, a kind woman who had always been supportive of the families in the community. "Mrs. Carter, I need to talk to you about something important," Miss Johnson said, her voice steady despite the anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. As they sat in the principal's office, Miss Johnson shared Malik's experiences, detailing the bullying and the hurtful comments he had faced. Mrs. Carter listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to resolve. "I had no idea this was happening," she said, her brow furrowing. "We need to address this immediately. Our school must be a safe space for every child." Together, they brainstormed ideas to tackle the issue head-on. They decided to organize an assembly focused on promoting inclusivity and addressing racism. Miss Johnson felt a sense of relief wash over her. This was the first step toward creating change. They would invite speakers from various backgrounds to share their experiences and educate the students about the importance of acceptance and understanding. As the assembly date approached, Miss Johnson felt a mix of hope and apprehension. She knew that confronting racism was not an easy task, but she was determined to stand up for her son and all the children who had been affected by prejudice. She wanted Malik to know that he was not alone, that there were people who cared and were willing to fight for what was right. On the day of the assembly, the gymnasium buzzed with energy as students filed in, chattering excitedly. Miss Johnson took a deep breath, her heart racing as she prepared to share her story. She hoped that by speaking out, she could inspire others to do the same and foster a culture of kindness and acceptance within the school. As the assembly began, she watched the faces of the children, some curious, some indifferent, and others still influenced by the negativity that had seeped into their hearts. But she was ready. The gymnasium was filled with the sounds of laughter and chatter as students settled into their seats, the bright banners hanging from the ceiling fluttering slightly in the cool air. Miss Johnson stood at the back, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see Malik sitting with his classmates, his expression a mix of excitement and apprehension. She wanted to shield him from the hurtful words he had faced, but she also knew that this assembly was a crucial step toward healing. Mrs. Carter took the stage, her presence commanding yet warm. "Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to talk about something very important: kindness, respect, and the value of diversity in our school community," she announced, her voice echoing through the gym. The students quieted down, their attention shifting to the principal. As the assembly progressed, various speakers took the stage, sharing their stories of overcoming prejudice and embracing differences. A local community leader spoke about the importance of unity, while a high school student shared her experience of being bullied for her appearance. Each story resonated with the audience, and Miss Johnson felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Finally, it was Miss Johnson's turn to speak. She stepped up to the microphone, her palms slightly sweaty but her resolve unwavering. She looked out at the sea of young faces, some curious, others skeptical. "Hello, everyone. My name is Miss Johnson, and I'm here to talk about something that affects us all, racism and bullying," she began, her voice steady. She shared Malik's story, recounting the hurtful comments he had faced and the pain it had caused both him and their family. "No child should ever feel like they don't belong because of the color of their skin," she said, her voice rising with passion. "We are all unique, and that's what makes our community beautiful. It's our differences that enrich our lives and help us grow." As she spoke, she could see the expressions of her audience shift. Some students looked down, reflecting on their own actions, while others leaned in, captivated by her words. "I want you all to remember that kindness is a choice," she continued. "You have the power to lift each other up or tear each other down. Let's choose kindness." When she finished, the gym erupted in applause. Miss Johnson felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she also knew that this was just the beginning. The assembly had sparked a conversation, but it would take more than one event to change the culture of the school. After the assembly, students began to approach her, some with shy smiles, others with questions. Malik stood by her side, his eyes wide with admiration. "You were amazing, Mom!" he exclaimed, his voice filled with pride. "I didn't know you could speak like that." Miss Johnson smiled down at him, her heart swelling. "Thank you, Malik. But remember, this is about all of us. We need to keep talking about these issues and support each other." As the days passed, the atmosphere at Maplewood Elementary began to shift. Teachers incorporated lessons on diversity and inclusion into their curricula, and students started to engage in discussions about respect and empathy. The bullying that Malik had faced began to wane, and he found solace in the friendships he was forming with classmates who had once been indifferent. However, not everyone was pleased with the changes. Mr. Thompson, who had been watching from the sidelines, felt his influence slipping away. He had always prided himself on maintaining a certain order in the neighborhood, and the assembly had challenged his views. He began to spread rumors among parents, claiming that the school was promoting reverse racism and that the assembly had been unnecessary. One afternoon, as Miss Johnson picked Malik up from school, she overheard a group of parents discussing the assembly. "I don't see why they had to make such a big deal about it," one parent said dismissively. "Kids will be kids. They need to toughen up." Miss Johnson felt a surge of anger but reminded herself that change takes time. She knew that the seeds of understanding had been planted, but they needed nurturing to grow. She decided to reach out to Mrs. Carter again, suggesting that they hold a follow-up event to continue the conversation about inclusivity and to address the concerns of parents who were resistant to change. Together, they planned a community forum, inviting parents, teachers, and students to come together and discuss the importance of fostering a safe and inclusive environment. Ms. Johnson felt a renewed sense of purpose as she prepared for the event, knowing that it was essential to keep the dialogue open and to ensure that every voice was heard. As the date of the forum approached, Ms. Johnson felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. The evening of the community forum arrived, and the atmosphere at Maplewood Elementary was charged with anticipation. Ms. Johnson arrived early, helping to set up chairs in the school's multipurpose room. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was not just about her son, Malik, but about creating a safe space for all children in the community. As parents and teachers began to filter in, Ms. Johnson greeted them warmly, her heart racing with a mix of hope and anxiety. She had invited a diverse panel of speakers, including local leaders, educators, and even students who had experienced bullying. The goal was to foster an open dialogue about racism, inclusivity, and the importance of standing together against discrimination. Mrs. Carter welcomed everyone, her voice steady and reassuring. "Thank you all for coming tonight. We're here to have an important conversation about our school community and how we can work together to ensure that every child feels safe and valued," she said, her eyes scanning the room filled with concerned parents and eager students. As the forum began, Miss Johnson felt a sense of purpose wash over her. She listened intently as the panelists shared their experiences and insights. One speaker, a local activist, spoke passionately about the impact of racism on children and the importance of teaching empathy from a young age. "We must create an environment where our children can learn to appreciate differences rather than fear them," she urged. When it was Miss Johnson's turn to speak, she took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady. "As a mother, I've seen firsthand how bullying can affect a child's self-esteem and sense of belonging. My son, Malik, faced bullying at school because of the color of his skin, and it broke my heart to see him hurt." She shared Malik's story, recounting the pain he had experienced and the strength it took for him to overcome it. "But I also want to emphasize that we have the power to change this narrative," she continued, her voice rising with passion. "We can create a community where every child feels safe, respected, and valued. It starts with us, parents, teachers, and students, standing together against hate and ignorance." As she spoke, she could see the faces of the audience shift. Some parents nodded in agreement, while others looked contemplative. She knew that not everyone would be receptive to her message, but she was determined to plant the seeds of change. After her speech, the floor was open for questions and comments. A few parents expressed their concerns, echoing Mr. Thompson's sentiments about the assembly and the need for children to toughen up. Miss Johnson listened patiently, responding with empathy. "I understand that some may feel this way, but it's important to recognize that bullying is not just a rite of passage. It can have lasting effects on a child's mental health and well-being," she explained. As the discussion continued, more parents began to share their own experiences with racism and bullying, creating a sense of solidarity in the room. They spoke about the importance of teaching their children to be allies and advocates for one another. The atmosphere shifted from one of resistance to one of understanding, and Miss Johnson felt a glimmer of hope. However, just as the conversation was gaining momentum, Mr. Thompson entered the room, his presence immediately palpable. He strode to the front, arms crossed, and a scowl on his face. "I don't see why we need to keep talking about this," he interjected, his voice loud and confrontational. "Kids need to learn to deal with things on their own. This is just making it worse." The room fell silent, and Miss Johnson felt her heart race. She knew this was a pivotal moment. "Mr. Thompson, I appreciate your perspective, but we're not here to coddle our children. We're here to teach them that kindness and respect are essential values," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Mr. Thompson scoffed, shaking his head. "You're just making excuses for weakness. Kids need to toughen up and learn to handle themselves." Miss Johnson took a deep breath, refusing to back down. "It's not about weakness. It's about creating a community where every child feels safe and supported. We can teach resilience without allowing bullying to thrive. We can do better for our children." The audience began to murmur in agreement, and Miss Johnson felt a surge of support from her neighbors. She could see Malik watching her from the back of the room, his eyes filled with admiration. In that moment, she knew she was fighting not just for him, but for all the children who had ever felt marginalized or alone. As the forum continued, the conversation shifted back to solutions. As the forum progressed, the atmosphere in the room began to transform. The initial tension created by Mr. Thompson's interruption slowly dissipated, replaced by a collective determination to foster a more inclusive environment at Maplewood Elementary. Parents and teachers began to share ideas, their voices rising in enthusiasm as they brainstormed ways to combat bullying and promote kindness. One mother, Mrs. Lee, suggested starting a buddy program where older students could mentor younger ones, creating a support system that would help children feel more connected. "We need to encourage friendships across grades," she said. If kids know they have someone looking out for them, it can make a huge difference. Another parent, Mr. Garcia, proposed organizing regular workshops for parents and children to discuss topics like empathy, diversity, and conflict resolution. We can't just talk about these issues once and expect change, he emphasized. We need ongoing conversations to help our kids understand the importance of respect and acceptance. Ms. Johnson felt a wave of hope wash over her as she listened to the ideas being shared. This was the kind of community she had envisioned, a place where everyone worked together to uplift one another. She raised her hand, eager to contribute. What if we also created a Diversity Day event? She suggested. We could celebrate different cultures, share stories, and showcase the beauty of our differences. It would be a great way to bring everyone together. The room buzzed with excitement at the idea, and Mrs. Carter nodded enthusiastically. That's a fantastic suggestion, Ms. Johnson. We can start planning for it right away. Let's make it a day where we celebrate who we are as a community. As the forum continued, Ms. Johnson felt a sense of camaraderie building among the attendees. They were no longer just parents and teachers. They were allies, united in their commitment to creating a safe and nurturing environment for all children. Even Mr. Thompson, who had initially been resistant, seemed to soften as he listened to the collective voices advocating for change. By the end of the evening, the forum had transformed into a rallying point for the community. They had established a plan to implement the Buddy program, organize workshops, and celebrate Diversity Day. Ms. Johnson felt a sense of accomplishment as she looked around the room, seeing the determination in her neighbors' eyes. As the attendees began to disperse, Ms. Johnson approached Mrs. Carter. "Thank you for your support tonight," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I really believe we can make a difference together." Mrs. Carter smiled warmly. "You've inspired us all, Ms. Johnson. Your courage to speak out has opened the door for important conversations. Let's keep this momentum going." That night, as Ms. Johnson tucked Malik into bed, she felt a sense of peace. "How was the forum, Mom?" he asked, his eyes bright with curiosity. "It was amazing, Malik. We talked about how to make our school a better place for everyone," she replied, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "And we're going to have a Diversity Day to celebrate all the different cultures in our community." Malik's face lit up with excitement. "That sounds awesome. Can I help with it?" "Of course. I'd love for you to be involved," Ms. Johnson said, her heart swelling with pride. "You can help me plan activities and maybe even share your own story." As Malik drifted off to sleep, Ms. Johnson reflected on the journey they had taken together. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but she felt hopeful. They had taken a stand against bullying and racism, and the community was beginning to unite in support of one another. In the weeks that followed, the changes at Maplewood Elementary began to take shape. The Buddy program was launched, and students eagerly signed up to mentor one another. Workshops were scheduled, and parents attended with open minds, ready to learn and grow. The school community was buzzing with energy, and Ms. Johnson felt a renewed sense of purpose. However, the lingering influence of Mr. Thompson was still present. He continued to voice his discontent, rallying a small group of parents who shared his views. They began to spread misinformation about the initiatives, claiming that the school was pushing a liberal agenda and that the changes were unnecessary. But Ms. Johnson refused to let fear or negativity deter her. She knew that the work they were doing was vital, and she was determined to stand firm in her beliefs. With the support of her neighbors, she organized a follow-up meeting to address any concerns and reinforce the importance of inclusivity. As the community continued to grow stronger, Ms. Johnson realized that they were not just fighting against prejudice, they were building a legacy of love, acceptance, and resilience for future generations. Together, they were creating a brighter future, one where every child could thrive, free from the shadows of hate.